Good morning everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint. Today's video is a kitchen video, and look, I forgot to introduce myself again. Our Small Footprint, my name's Nyssa, we're a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia, and I do a whole lot of videos, food, homesteading, groceries, planning, all that sort of stuff. So if you're interested, please hit the subscribe button and watch along. Today's video is all in the kitchen. We canned apple butter barbecue sauce. We did osso buco for dinner, and we also did some baked oatmeal for the next day, and vacuum sealed sausages that we made the other day, all that sort of thing. So it was a whole day in the kitchen, and I thought I'd bring you along because everyone seems to enjoy watching. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next time. Okay, so I got back to the apple butter first thing in the morning. So this apple butter had been left out overnight because I hadn't got to it the night before, and it's negative temperatures overnight, so that's fine. So what I did was I used the Thermomix to puree the apple butter. So I make my apple butter skins and everything else. All I do is cut out the seeds and the core, and I use it in the pressure canner. I did this yesterday, day before, on whichever video. I think there's a gap between videos because of chicken pens, but it was done in the pressure cooker, 8 minutes to 10 minutes under pressure. So I used the Thermomix to blend the apple butter into a smooth blend. I measured it into a pot to get approximate amounts of cups into a pot, because I am going to be using this to make apple butter barbecue sauce. So I just need to have approximate cup amounts into a pot so that I'm aware of adding the other ingredients to make it safe for canning purposes. So I used a cup measure just to figure out the approximate amount of cups that each jug of the Thermomix made, so that I could use that to measure out my apple butter into the pan. And then I repeated it. So I did all of the apple butter that I needed to make the apple butter barbecue first, just kept on filling the jug, pureeing it and measuring it into the pot so that I would have enough there for making the apple butter barbecue. Once I had the right amount in the pot, which was 16 cups of apple butter, then I added the other ingredients. So we made this recently and the kids adored it, so I'm making it again, and this is what I used last time, so I'm going to be using it again. So I did the 16 cups of the apple butter, and then I added 3 of the jars of tomato passata. Now these are the muddy jars, and they're a little bit smaller than they're 680 grams I think, versus some of them are 900 grams. Tomatoes, not a product that affects acidity, like it makes acidity go up, not down, so it's not going to hurt to have more tomato products. But I used 3 of these jars to 16 cups of apple butter. Once I empty them in, I then have to add 3 cups of apple cider vinegar. So what I do is I pour a cup of apple cider vinegar into each of those passata jars so that I can give them a shake, pour them into the pan, and then that way I'm getting any excess passata that's in the jars that I've missed by just pouring it out. So I've got 3 cups of apple cider vinegar in there as well. I then added garlic powder, salt, pepper, smoked paprika, and sugar. These ratios are a little bit to taste, a little bit to do what you want with, but I will put a link to the recipe that I started with in the comments as well, so that you can follow that exactly if that's your preference. Sugar wise, the recipe has 12 cups of sugar to this amount of apple butter barbecue, and that is not something I can do. So last time I added 6 cups, and it was still pretty sweet, so I only added 4 this time, and just used that. Sugar doesn't affect the canning at all, so you can put as little or as much sugar as you like in there. Once I added all the sugar in, I mixed it really well. I also added some molasses. Now, molasses isn't in the recipe, but for me, molasses is a really important ingredient in a barbecue sauce. It adds this real depth of flavor to it, so I added it because that's my preference. Again, it's a sugar. It's not going to affect canning times. So I added the molasses and mixed it all through. While I was getting all this done, I was also cooking dinner. So this is just a quick shot of what we had for dinner. We had ossobuco again, which we had served with risotto. But so we've got ossobuco cooking on the stove as well, just in case you see that while we're going through everything else. So you need to bring the sauce to a simmer. You don't want to simmer it too hard, or you're going to end up with some burn on the bottom of the pot. And you don't want a lid on it, because what you're trying to do is reduce the sauce. So you can have it as thin or as thick as you like, realistically. You don't have to reduce it a whole lot. I reduce it almost to half. That way it's thick enough for the kids to use a spoon with, so they're not pouring it, because if they're pouring it, then they use far too much. But it also means less jars when it's thicker. So theoretically they use less, it's less jars to can it, and it doesn't have as much wastage, theoretically. So I bring it down to about half of where it was, and you're basically just cooking off any water in there and reducing that sauce down for that. It is personal preference though. Do it to the thickness that you like. So while that was going, I put the rest of the apple butter through the Thermomix and put it in a container. So there's enough apple butter here that there is some surplus that the kids are having with pancakes or something, I can't remember what, but there's also enough here to make another batch of the apple butter barbecue. So I don't have a pot big enough to make a double batch. Well, I'm already making a double batch. I don't have a pot big enough to make a quadruple batch. So I will have to make the next batch in the next day or so, and I'll just use that apple butter straight from the fridge, warm it up, add the ingredients, and do it that way. So that's going in the fridge for until then. Because this is what I use some of the apple butter for, I remember now. So because I had that surplus apple butter, I decided to make a couple of trays of baked oatmeal for tomorrow, using some of that apple butter as the liquid in it. So we tried another version of this baked oatmeal. We used the normal with oats and a whole lot of cinnamon, and I added some walnuts in there because I have walnuts and the kids have been enjoying them, eggs, and then a bunch of apple butter into the mix as well. Now I got plenty of jars of apple butter on the shelf, so if this works out quite well, I can use a jar of apple butter in the baked oatmeal in the future too, and that will use some of that off the shelf, but also it's tasty in the baked oatmeal as well. As I was making this, I realized I'd run out of kefir. So this is how I do my milk kefir. We have a jar that is large enough to put 3 litres of milk in. This is the only reason I buy fresh milk for. We use UHT milk for anything else, like yogurts and stuff like that. And we don't use milk straight. We only ever use it when it's been fermented. The kids can tolerate it fermented and in baked goods and smoothies, things like that, so long as it's been fermented, but they don't tolerate it if it's straight. So my milk kefir, I strained my kefir off. This one was a fairly fresh one, so it's not particularly thick. You strain it off and get as much off the grains as possible, and then we stick the grains back in the 3 litre jar and fill that up with the 3 litres of milk, and it just sits on the bench until it hits the separation point. You can see it when it's ready to go. You can see the grains have all floated to the top, and there's this little, like a ring of whey between the grains and the thicker kefir, and then it goes in the fridge until I'm ready to strain it again. So I added kefir and maple syrup to the mix as well, into the wet ingredients, and once I whisked all the wet ingredients together, I then mixed it with the dry just in the baking trays, and then I covered it and stuck it in the fridge for overnight, and I will pull it out and I will stick it on the barbecue first thing in the morning when I get up, and then the kids can have it warm for breakfast. So I made 2 trays of this because I will bake both trays, and the kids will eat it cold the next day as well, or they can warm it up if they want, but I always try and make enough for a couple of days breakfast when I'm making baked breakfasts, because it's a lot of effort to make breakfast early in the morning, especially in winter when it's really cold. Once they were both in the fridge, I had to then move on to filling the jars with the barbecue sauce. So all normal, we did the barbecue sauce in larger jars this time because I did them in the smaller jars last time thinking that that would work, but the kids really enjoy this. I've dropped all the sugar in it, and so they're eating it quite largely, and that's fine. It means that larger jars are easier to, less lids used, I suppose. So we filled all the jars and I debubbled them and made sure that the head space was correct for the jars, and then cleaned all the rims like normal. So cloth, white vinegar, cleaned all the rims. This is a sticky, sugary sauce, so you need to make sure your rims are clean because it will stop your jars from sealing if it isn't. I had purchased some 4 jars lids on Amazon to try because they're getting some really great reviews everywhere else, so I gave these a go. They're not cheap though to buy them from America, but I had a voucher for Amazon anyway, so I paid less than full price for these. I will link them in the comments. They sealed, every jar sealed. Every jar that I have used them with has sealed perfectly, so I am very happy with them. They are a bit of a cost though. So put the lids and rings on the 4 jars lids and put the lug lids on the lug lid jars and got them all sorted to go in the canner. I used my pressure canner as my water bath canner, like the pot for my pressure canner, so it means that I can double layer things in the pot. So I have 2 of the trivets, one goes in the bottom, jars go on, trivet goes on top of the jars, more jars go on top, and you just have to make sure that there is 1.5 inches of water above the top jar. The problem with filling it this high is that you do lose some water in the canning process. I always have the lid on to reduce that, but I will top it up with a bit of boiling water if I feel like it needs a little bit more water in it to get it through the canning process. And these go for 25 minutes processing time. Probably 25 While minutes
that was in the canner, we had to vacuum seal the sausages.
So the sausages have cured in the fridge for 24 hours. We fill the sausage casings and then they go in the fridge so that the sausage casings can sort of dry and seal to the meat within the sausages. So they sit uncovered in open air in the fridge for 24 hours for that to happen. And then we vacuum seal them up to freeze them. So Kavik helped me with this one. He likes pressing the buttons and opening and closing the vacuum sealer and things like that. So he was my assistant for vacuum sealing up the sausages this time. He loves to help with tasks like this, that he feels like he's accomplishing things, which is good. So I enjoy when they want to contribute and help as well, especially food related, because I think it gives them a bit of more of an appreciation of the amount of work that's required for the food that I serve up to them to eat. So we got all those vacuum sealed up and put in the freezer for meals for a little bit. We didn't get a whole lot of sausages done this month because of the sausage stuffing issues and things like that. So I will probably need to make them again, but we'll have to figure out the stuffer before I give that a go. But anyway, so we got the jars out and it was already dark. So I've got a lamp I've got a light, like a spotlight type thing in my kitchen now, but I haven't figured out the best spot to put it or the way the camera works better. My phone would probably have worked better here because it's better with low lighting. But anyway, all the jars came out of the canner. They all got put on the bench, so they sit there for 24 hours, and then tomorrow I will check the seals and give them a clean and put them on the shelf. So that was today's cooking. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you again in the next couple of days. Thanks, guys.